Okay, Chair, we're now live. You can begin the meeting.
Thank you very much, David. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's extraordinary meeting of the Growth, Environment and Resources Scrutiny Committee. Good afternoon. So I've got good afternoon there as well. Welcome to the meeting. I'd like to start by welcoming those members of the public and press that have also joined us watching the live stream of this meeting through the Council's YouTube page. Due to government guidelines and on social distancing, this meeting is taking place remotely in accordance with current legislation, which makes provision for remote attendance at and remote access to council meetings. The meeting is also following Peterborough City Council's virtual meeting protocol. In order for this meeting to run smoothly, I ask several things from members and participants. Firstly, that you keep your video camera switched on with your microphone muted except when I ask you to speak. If you wish to speak, then please raise your virtual hand, which is the blue hand and is located at the bottom of your participants section. Some people may have a newer version of Zoom, in which case the raised hand has moved to the participants section, from the participants section to the reactions section, and is now coloured yellow. Whichever version you're using, please ensure you use your raised hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. I and the Democratic Services team will keep an eye on participants list to see who wishes to speak. Please be patient. If you're not invited to speak as soon as you raise your hand, there may be other people in the list before you. The Democratic Services team will be monitoring the participants list to see if anyone has dropped out of the meeting, and will try and contact you to provide assistance to rejoin the meeting if this should happen. As with all new systems, if we run into technical problems, I ask for your patience. Should this occur, an adjournment of the meeting will be declared while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible, we will then adjourn the meeting until such a time as it can be reconvened. Finally, I'll remind members that all virtual meetings are recorded. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, I will begin by taking a roll call of all scrutiny members to establish your presence. When I call out your name, please unmute your microphone and confirm you are in attendance. Thanks very much. Councillor Aitken.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Brown.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Burbidge.
Present, Chair, thank you.
Councillor Casey.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Ellis.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Judy Fox.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Howard.
Good evening, Chair. Present.
Councillor Skipstead.
Present.
Councillor Wiggin.
Present.
Councillor Keam.
Present and good evening.
Good evening. And Parish Councillor Leavesley.
Present, Chair.
And you have myself present as well, Chris Harper as the chair. Also in attendance, we have David Beecham, supporting Democratic Services Officer, and other members of Democratic Services team who will be supporting the meeting in the background should we experience any technical difficulty. Thanks very much. We'll now move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. David.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Yazeen this evening, and Councillor Keam is in attendance as a substitute.
Thank you very much. Item 2 then is declarations of interest and whipping declarations. Could I also just point out this time, if you are a Peterborough United season ticket holder, you should declare that now too. No declarations. Thank you very much. No whipping declarations. Agenda item 3 then refers to exclusion of press and public. It is for this committee to determine whether the press and public should be excluded from the meeting for item 4 on the grounds that the item contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, because it contains information confidential to the operation of and the financial affairs of Peterborough United Football Club. The public interest test has been applied to the information contained within this exempt annex, and it is considered that the need to retain the information as exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing it. Please note that if this is agreed, we will only go into the exempt session when discussing information that is in the exempt appendices. If any member of the committee has an objection to going into the exempt session for this item, i.e. the appendices 1, 2 and 3, when they are discussed, please raise your hand now. I see no objection, so in agreement, the committee will only go into exempt session if the appendices are to be discussed, at which point the video live stream will also finish. We'll now move to agenda item 4 then, pages 3 to 12. I'd like to welcome also at this point This is the sale of land and buildings at London Road Peterborough Properties Limited. I'd also like to welcome at this point councillors Holditch, Hiller and Seaton to the meeting. And the following officers are also in attendance to assist us with the presentation of the report. Pete Carpenter, who's the Corporate Director Resources, Howard Russell, Commercial Lawyer, and also I'd like to welcome Jason Neal, who's the Director of Peterborough United Football Club, and Ed Warwick, who's Applegarth Partners. Okay, Peter, I take it you're going to introduce the report for us?
Thank you, Chair. The Council proposes to sell land and buildings at London Road, which include the Western Home Stadium, the Alia Business Centre and ancillary land to London Road Peterborough Properties. The Cabinet report and the scrutiny is over the following items: the financial value received by the Council, the significant social and economic value delivered by the transaction, the sale terms in terms of ancillary agreements and associated financial schedules, the economic and social benefit consideration, collection of rent and rationale for partial waiver, and a related party transaction of an enhanced training ground facility and its associated community value. The Council expect the transaction following scrutiny in this committee to be approved tomorrow to allow completion for the 31st of March. In what the Chair has said in terms of agenda item 3, I'm hoping that the vast majority of this will be an open session. With Appendix A, it's unusual to have a heads of terms in the public session. However, the vast majority of the heads of terms is actually included in the Cabinet report now. The only items that aren't, and I'm just going to call them out now, are the transaction timetable, which was a set of timetable between the Council and Peterborough Limited to actually get to this point, and it was just our actions. The length of a training grant, but a question will come up on that anyway, and it's 5 years, it's in the open environment, so that's quite open. And we also, as a council, said we would help Peterborough United to potentially identify sites for a new stadium and facilitate applications for external funding to enable infrastructure, land clearance and decontamination to help to create a developable site, wherever that may be. So those are the only 3 things in Appendix A that aren't actually in the Cabinet report. As I said, it is unusual to ever have a heads of terms in an open environment, but for openness, those are the only 3 items. Item 2 is exempt and is how Peterborough United are affected by COVID in terms of its I&E, and so that will need to be an exempt if we have questions on that. Appendix 3 is a redevelopment acreage estimate for building consent on the land post-move for housing provided on a non-reliance basis, and it's for comparison only. It's to give the committee an idea of what the land is valued at for housing development should a move happen within the 8 years. And again, that's an estimate, and so that's why that's in the exempt annex. And again, it's only a single figure. At the moment, so on top of that, obviously the recommendation from the report is to for you to scrutinise and forward recommendations. What I'd like to do now is just ask Jason Neal, who's the director of Peterborough United Football Club and also obviously a director of the new company, just to set out what Peterborough United and the new company want to achieve out of this.
Fine.
Yes, thank you very much, Pete, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here before you all, and I look forward to answering any questions. I will say I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have any season ticket holders amongst us, but hopefully we can change it over the coming years with our ongoing fan initiatives. So to answer the question that was raised by Peter, we're very keen and enthusiastic to bring the football club and the stadium together under the same ownership group. We think that's very important for the long-term prosperity of the club. And in particular, enables us to make improvements in the London Road Stadium, Western Home Stadium, to generate secondary revenues from things like turning various facilities that are unused into revenue generating opportunities that we can't do now. And of course, to bring the 2 entities together. Concurrent with this, as Pete outlined, is a substantial investment into the Youth Academy, which is one of the key free strategies of the club, in so much as to build our academy to generate higher value players, and also to provide community facilities for sports, which is a key contributor of this proposal.
Thank you. Anybody else, Peter, going to be brought in?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, questions then, members. Must be some. Councillor Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to go first, but that's how it's. Yeah, I'm looking at this from a point of view of Peterborough City Council. I'm scrutinising as a councillor, and also for the city of Peterborough. And whilst I say that, I'm not saying that I'm not supportive of Peterborough United and everything they want to do. They are my second team, me being a Peterborean. My first team being Arsenal, but that's not important. For me, what is important is, my question is the justification around why we are selling it now when we're in the current economic position we are nationally, internationally even, with COVID-19, and also why we're proposing to sell it at a loss. We brought it for, and do stop me if there's anything exempt I'm about to say, but I don't think it is. It's in the main report. We bought it for 8.4 million in 2010, and we're proposing to sell it back to Peterborough United Holdings for 5.2, about 5.2 million. So a net loss of about £3 or so million. So for me, I need a bit more justification why we're doing that, given the pressures we've got on local government funding at the moment, and why the taxpayers should be picking up that amount of loss, selling it back. I know that it perhaps may be in the budget to pick up that money, but I just want a bit more justification why we proposing to sell it now, and why at a loss. Can we not wait? And if we do want to sell it back at another time, if somebody can answer that for me.
Okay, Peter, as you're the person who put the report forward, are you going to go to David? Refer to David?
No, I will. Councillor Harper, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Ellis, for the question. In overall terms, when we bought the ground originally, we've done a number of things since that time, and at a high level. At the present time, the total we have agreed revenue and capital benefit to the council is 12.9 million, which gives an overall profit on the transaction of about 1.7 million. Now that's come about in a number of ways. You're quite right. We put capital in of 8.2 million, but what that allowed us to do was actually to have control over the ground, and that allowed us to invest another 2.8 million to deliver, with a lot of government funding, the Alia Centre, which of course has delivered significant numbers of business and startups since it's been there. We've obviously, part of the site has been used for the 295 Vista homes, which have generated over £2 million in council tax, and that of course increases at 400k a year. We've had over 4 million of rent from Peterborough in that time period. We've had we have an outstanding Section 106 receipt of just under 400k from the Vista Homes development, which needs to be invested for more energy efficient homes in the town. And of course, we will be building on the gravel car park through Meacham Homes sometime over the next couple of years, more affordable homes. And so the overall value to the council is around 12.9 million. And so in net terms, we are at the moment about 1.7 million pounds up on the deal. Now, it's quite difficult to assess in the last 10 years what we might have done if we hadn't have had that money invested, because obviously interest rates in that whole time have been about 0.5% and lower. But if you said didn't do this and invested it in something else, the 10-year capital costs in terms of the interest charges are about 1.4 million pounds. So even looking at it in that way, it's a net positive inflow to the council. And just the split of that money in terms of the 12.9, about 6.5 million is revenue and about 6.4 is capital. Does that help, Councillor Ellis?
Yeah, that gives a bit more information.
And just to exemplify, of course, with the Vista Homes, we get another 400k in every year, so it keeps going up. And of course, we've got business rates and etc. on the Alia Centre, which we wouldn't have had originally.
And Councillor Ellis, if I can sort of answer the question about why we're choosing to do this now, we were actually choosing to do this in March of last year. So when Stuart and I bought into Peterborough United, there were 2 or 3 things that we really wanted to do. One was to take ownership of the stadium to bring it back with the club. And the second was to heavily invest in Youth Academy, which we've done and continue to do. And the third was hopefully to deliver Championship football to our fans and us, which I hope in about 11 minutes we're going to take a really big step forward in doing so. So it took nearly a year and a half to put this deal together. It was ready to close at the end of March 2020, and we were all ready to go, but unfortunately COVID happened at that time, so which is the reason for the delay.
Thanks for that, Jason. Thanks for adding that. Very good. Councillor Keam.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. My question is in relation to page 4, clause 4.1, paragraph 5, please, where it states that the southern part of the embankment has been anticipated for the relocation of the stadium. So we had a meeting, we were told that the current formal planning application hasn't been submitted. Have other sites been identified as well for the relocation, or is it definite? And if that's the case, will there be any public consultation in regards to this, and at what level? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can, shall I answer that?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, there was a question on this at full council, Councillor, and the answer is as per that. The council agreed to help the club in looking at enough sites, and obviously we would rather the football club remain in the centre of town, wherever a site might be located for that, and so that is ongoing. There is still a long, wherever that site is, there is still a long planning process that we'll have to go through to actually get to a point of planning consent. And so that's all got to happen, and that will include public consultation and all the normal things you'd expect.
Thank you. Yes, that answers my question. I just got a follow-up question. Jason, I was really encouraged to hear about the youth activities and the investment that you've put in. I think that that's really encouraging, given obviously the activities regarding COVID and the reduced mobility of the youth around that. I was wondering if that's going to be incorporated into the additional facilities that have been described, and what type of additional facilities are you thinking of, please?
Yeah, so it's the club's goal and vision to obtain Category 2 status, which facilitates another £250,000 a year of Premier League payments to the club, and enables us to buy a whole mini army of additional coaches. So there'll be substantial additional employment in the Peterborough region, which I think is very good. But more importantly, it will provide coaching and playing opportunities for all of our players. And we're today starting to see the benefits of that. I was talking to Darren this morning, and he said that some of the Youth Academy team are very close to knocking out some of the first team players, which is, you know, a real testimony to what's going on there. From the community perspective, we will build, or hope to build, subject to planning permission, an indoor dome, football dome, which will be partitioned by a line of very nice trees. So we'll turn a disused or partially used gravel car park into a nice sports facility protected by a line of trees. That will be used both by us as part of our Cat 2 Academy status, but also by the wider community as well. So obviously we're not training every minute of every day. And when we're not using it, it'll be available for the school where our training academy sits, and also the wider community. It could be men's league or ladies leagues or youth soccer opportunities or youth football opportunities.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wiggin.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've got several questions. Do you want me to take one at a time and then let other people come in?
That would be good, because obviously I don't want, if there are questions burning as well. So if you wouldn't mind, then we'll bring. We've only got one at the moment behind you, so do one and then we'll cover.
Yeah, thank you. So my first question is about the City Council finances and what would happen if we were unable to complete the sale before the end of the year. I note from the report that, and from the budget that we discussed at the last full council meeting, that we are dependent on the capital receipt for our balanced budget. So could you outline what the consequences would be for the City Council if this sale does not go through in the timescale required?
Peter, that's definitely yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. Yes, we have a target of 3.9 million capital receipts, which we convert to pay the minimum revenue provision this year in the budget. That reduces to 2 million next year. Obviously, this 4.1 million would get us to that target. We do have one or two other capital receipts in the fire as well, but this would mean we would have a 2 to 3 million deficit, taking account of all other capital receipts we have at the moment. So that's a reason why we need the transaction delivered by Wednesday next week.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor, well, we've got Skipstead, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a question, something in relation to what Councillor Kine was asking, because the proposed location, or the location that's been mentioned as the embankment, is part of the local plan in terms of an area of protection of green space. And I think there's a great concern in the city about this. If it's a protected green space, how is that possible that that can be a proposed area for building?
If I might respond to that, Chair.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Councillor Skipstead. And you know, in response to you and Councillor Kayum, I did explain at length, I think, at the last full council meeting, that no decisions had been made for the relocation of any stadium to that area of the embankment. It is contrary to local plan. You're absolutely right. I think that's been widely known, and there are many rumours swirling around that we've done deals, money's exchanged hands, permissions have been given, we've sold the embankment. It's all completely pie in the sky. It is incumbent upon any potential developer for any facility on that embankment to make a case that it is acceptable under the terms of our current adopted local plan. I can't be any clearer than that. I tried to be clear at full council. I thought that was accepted. No deal has been done, period.
Oh, pretty clear. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you for that response. It was just that it's mentioned in this report.
Well, I think that's a wish, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely. I can come back on that. Our understanding with the football club is to endeavour to find or to assist them in finding a site for a new stadium within the city boundary. That is our arrangement, and we are very happy to do that. We want to retain, as has already been mentioned, we want to retain the football club within Peterborough for all the right reasons. I don't think anybody would ever question that. But the position of that potential relocation is far from firm, I can tell you that.
you very much. Thanks for clarifying for me. Councillor Hiller. Right, I've got Councillor Casey.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a question for Peter, really, or Councillor Seaton. Mr. Carpenter mentioned the investment that we'd made in the stand at the moment. So we'd had the Alia Business Centre, but also I suppose you've got the Western stand as well. But the council has invested in the stand. Did we use loans to invest in that? And are we still paying interest on those loans that we made? And has that been taken into account in the deal that's been agreed towards the end? So is there a residual? I suppose my real question is there a residual cost to the works that we've already paid for an asset that we won't necessarily be owning?
I think the answer is yes, we borrowed the money. However, what Peter was talking about earlier was that there is a net financial benefit overall to the council. Peter, do you want to just confirm that?
Yes, no, thank you, Councillor Seaton, and thank you, Councillor Casey. Yes, there is a net positive effect, but what we do is we will use the capital receipt to pay off minimum revenue provision, which is actually debt. So you pay off with one and do with the other.
Councillor Casey, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It's really, I suppose it's the cash flow is the bit that I'm looking at the bottom line. So, and if it has a net positive gain, then that's okay.
Good.
Chair, could I just add one point that might help with that and might just clarify something that was said earlier? I think it was Councillor Wiggin was asking about the effect on the current year's accounts. You know, clearly, if the receipt, and it's not our intention that it moves into next year, we hope to get the receipt this year, subject to tonight. But if it were to move into next year, clearly what we would do is use reserves to cover any shortfall this year, but have additional benefit next year. Peter, I've read that correctly?
Councillor Seaton, that is correct, although I'd like to point out we have limited reserve levels.
Yeah.
We both agree on that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wiggin, would you like to do your second question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As part of the deal to do with the covenant on the area and the clause for future housing should the stadium be sold on in the future, it's now showing the overage clause with the council receiving 40% and the football enterprise receiving 60%. One of my, I called in the previous application before it was withdrawn, and this area was one of my concerns. Could you confirm how this is different to the, I think it was called a clawback clause on the previous deal, and whether this now represents a better deal for the City Council? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. This is in reality, the overage is a clawback clause. And this is both the original heads of terms and the contract we're in now is an overage on the pre-development cost for housing if the stadium should move. So at the moment, our present view is that 4060 reflects present market conditions. As an order of magnitude, we think at the moment, and our view is present conditions, that actually the market value for building houses on the ground, for preparing the land for houses. So we're not talking about development cost, because that's not this. This is the housing uplift for the development of housing is just slightly higher than the actual value we're getting for the ground itself. Now that might change in the future, and that's why it's important to have this there.
Okay, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask a question regarding what about, because in the report, it's in part 3.6, it does talk about the amendments. I probably would be happier if the part about the relocated to new zone embankment wasn't in the report, and I'm concerned around that. Is it incumbent on this going through that the Peterborough United ground is moved to a new location, or this may be a question to the Peterborough United representatives as well as officers, because I'm very concerned about a possible route to embankment. Have they looked at other sites, and is it incumbent on this report that, on this going through, that the ground has to move? I also take it to 3.10 where it says about the ground being maintained for professional football. I presume that means the ground wherever in Peterborough it may be, but I certainly want a little bit, what if the decision is it goes through, but an understanding that it does not move, the ground stays in the same area.
Chair, if I can start that, and then I think Jason will probably want to come in. In terms of the deal on the table, we've given deferred consideration for economic value of the ground of 20%. In the deal, if Peterborough United were not to move within the 8 years that we've got in here, we get that deferred consideration. So in direct response to your question, Councillor Ellis, if the club were not to move, and that is an option in this deal, then the deferred consideration would come back to the council of 20% as well.
Jason, did you want to add something from your point?
Yeah, I would say the club has a mid-term ambition to move to a multi-purpose new facility that would create substantial economic value and employment opportunities. So the challenge with our current stadium is it's used 30, maybe 40 times a year, whereas we're aware that there are other opportunities to use a facility maybe 300 times a year, from everything from conferences to weddings and obviously football on a Saturday. Notwithstanding that, we haven't, other than very early exploratory review of the Peterborough area, we haven't really looked at what a site would look like. We're obviously going forward on that process, but the main purpose of this meeting, and in fact the only thing in front of us is this transaction. Whilst it's our midterm goal, there is obviously no certainty that we'll be able to work and find a suitable location and finance it and seek and gain planning permission.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've got Parish Councillor Keith Leaveley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify what happens after the sale. Jason mentioned that they were wanting to reunite the club and the ground, and talked about trying to utilise the ground more intensively. When they move, then obviously the ground will be sold for housing or whatever. Presumably there's not much point in investing heavily in the ground, because the money is going to be down the drain if they suddenly move to new ground. But what happens to the Alia Business Centre and the new stand? Presumably the stand goes, but Jason's just said they want to diversify the stadium, the new stadium. Does the Alia Business Centre go, or does that stay there and give revenue to the club? I'm not quite sure what the implications are for those items.
Yeah, good questions.
So I think there are, and thank you very much for the question. I think there are opportunities to generate secondary revenues in the existing stadium with modifications. And given the timeline that we're looking at for the potential for a new stadium, it makes sense to do those. It didn't make sense to do those when we were effectively a tenant. It didn't make sense for us to make capital expenditures. It now will do. What will happen with the Alia Centre in the event that we move? I don't have an answer to that question. Obviously, they're a tenant in an existing facility, so it will be a choice for them as whether they would want to stay, or if we developed a new facility, whether they would want to move with us into, let's say, a tech incubator or accelerator. I think it's a very sensible question, but it's almost too difficult to sort of open a crystal ball and say, you know, what's going to happen in 8 years or 5 years or whenever it will be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wiggin, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report states that the estimated positive impact on the city's economy is £7 million a year. I seem to remember seeing figures that in the past that has been a lot higher. Can I ask what period that figure relates to? Whether that's the last few years when Posh have been unfortunately stuck in League One, and the figures I'm thinking of come from an earlier time when Posh were last in the Championship and playing much bigger teams who brought much larger numbers of supporters. I can remember games, going to games against the likes of Leeds, who bring thousands and thousands of fans, whereas some of the League One clubs barely manage a couple of hundred to come all the way to Peterborough from sometimes quite a long way. So, yeah, is there any clarification on that figure?
If I can answer that, Chair, the economic impact report was done about a year and a half ago, so it is in present conditions, you're quite right, when the club are in the present division, not higher ones.
So to follow up on that, see, as mentioned before, we're obviously hoping that we complete the league season this year, Posh get promoted, which was, many would argue, unfairly prevented last season by the points per game calculation at the end of the season, when it was quite possible that any outcome other than what happened could have happened. And going forward, we would see a significantly larger benefit to the city.
Correct.
And Councillor Wiggin, I would definitely argue it was unfair, but of course I'm biased. I think we would get obviously a significant increase in contributions to the city from being in the Championship. I also think that in the last couple of years, we have started to roll out bigger summer concerts. That's had a pretty significant impact to the local community. We would have done it last year and this, and obviously we won't be able to do it, but hopefully in 2022.
Councillor Keith Lizzie, you've still got your hand up. Are you wanting another question?
Could I just ask Jason if they've made any comparative assessments of clubs elsewhere who've developed grounds? I'm a Chesterfield supporter who did this about 10 years ago, Jason. You've probably been to Chesterfield. I wondered sort of if you've got a ballpark figure, what you think it will cost you to move.
We have, but obviously I don't feel completely comfortable.
I'm not quite sure that fits in with this either, to be fair.
In this forum.
Okay. Councillor Wiggin.
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the deal, as has been described earlier, there is a benefit for the economic value provided by the football club and the writing off of the outstanding rent. Now, I don't disagree with either of those in the context of the football club. However, can you reassure me that this won't be open to other organisations in the city to come along and say, well, you gave this to the football club, why not us? We suffered during COVID, we couldn't pay our rent, things like that. Why are you helping them and not us? I just want to make sure that there is a consistency in decision making when it comes to spending, or in this case, reducing the income gained by the council taxpayer.
Shall I kick that off, Peter? And then if you want to add to it.
Yep.
I think that's a very reasonable question, Councillor Wiggin. For me, the difficulty there is, where is a comparative situation? So if we were selling an asset to someone else in the city, which I think should question, would we give an economic benefit in that sale? And I can't think of any similar situation that exists. So my view would be, if we got to that point, obviously it's something we'd consider. Peter, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. You've come exactly where I would have been coming from as well. Obviously, this is a sale, a purchase and then a sale. And so what we're trying to do is get value from the end-to-end transaction, which I've said earlier is about a 1.7 million upside. We do offer, and again, the vast majority of other people at the moment through COVID, we've done significant grants and through the government to those industries. And we will always consider when people come to us, payment plans and other ways of paying things. And so I think it's a slightly different scenario because of it being end-to-end in terms of a purchase. We've generated quite a bit of value out of this for the town, and now we're selling it on. But we're selling it on and probably in answer to one of the earlier questions, in a time that's actually quite positive for the club and the town to actually move it on to someone that can take it to somewhere else. Because again, one of the things that Jason has just raised is the ability to invest in it. The council don't have the ability to invest in the stadium now with our financial position, whereas the club do, which again is an advantage for the town.
Okay. See no more hands up. Anybody else before I move on? No? Okay, fair enough. Well, we were asked to scrutinise the decision to sell land and buildings at London Road to London Road Peterborough Properties Limited and make any recommendations. Are the committee satisfied we have done this? If you're not, please raise your hand to object. No, don't see any hands raised at all. No, just giving it a little extra time because there's a bit of a delay on mine, so just making sure. No, right, okay. There's nothing to go into the exempt session for, so we will miss that part altogether. In which case, we have done what we needed to do, and I'm going to draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody, for all your input and your questions, and everybody who attended for all your answers. Thank you very much, and have a good night, and take care of yourself.